Hey, welcome back, 6th grade, to another exciting edition of Ancient Civilizations, Greece edition. Very nice. So, you may remember that last time we finished up our study of ancient Greece geography, alright? Make sure you keep studying that. And we introduced these two people, the Minoans and the Mycenaeans, or the Mycenaeans. Well, today, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to dive heavily into this group right here, the Minoans, okay? Very nice. But first, before we dive into them, I like to give you folks objectives. You might remember objectives. I gave you one from the geography unit. These are things that are going to guide you on your total course of study. They're going to be a thing that you can turn into a study question at the very end. So basically, by the end of this entire lesson, over the course of the next few days, you should be able to answer the question in this objective. Very nice. So, as a reminder, I do want you taking notes during these videos because you just remember a heck of a lot more of what you write down. And I especially want you to write down the objective and the theme I'm going to give you on this slide because they are going to guide your study. All right, here's your objective. Your objective for this lesson is to describe the similarities and the differences of the two cultures being the Minoans and the Mycenaeans, which led to Greek civilization. Again, to describe the similarities and the differences of the two cultures which led to the Greek civilization. Now make sure you write this down, underline it, circle it, star it, make a signal to yourself to come back to this later because it's very important. And again, when this is done, you can turn this into a study question after we learn about these two groups and you can say, okay, what were the similarities and differences between these two cultures? That's how we use our objectives. Very nice, folks. Now, I say this, that these cultures led to Greek civilization, because it's true that they did. You must keep in mind, these groups, the Minoans and the Mycenaeans, lived thousands of years ago, well before what we consider classical Greece. Classical Greece being the city-states like Athens, Sparta, Thebes, Alexander the Great, the philosophers of Plato, Socrates, Aristotle. That all comes much, much later. All right. In fact, as much time passed between these ancient groups and classical Greece than passed between classical Greece and now. So these folks are like the ancient Greeks to what we would call the ancient Greeks. And the point is that the Minoans and the Mycenaeans built the groundwork or the foundation for what would become the flourishing classical Greek civilization. This will, of course, become more apparent later on in the year when we study the classical Greek civilization. You're going to look back and be like, oh, that's totally a Minoan influence. I'm just setting the groundwork now. So here's a theme I want you to write down. Classical Greek civilization was influenced and built upon by these two peoples. Okay? Themes are very important, like objectives, because they are going to also help guide our study of these people. So make sure you get this theme down. Classical Greek civilization was influenced and built upon by these. Okay, remember, folks, if I'm going too fast for you, pause the video anytime to finish writing down. And I'm going to give you one more theme, and I want you to write this one down too. We know what we know about these people through archaeology. You might remember that archaeology is digging up their art and architecture, right? This might remind you of when we were studying the 8 traits of civilization way, way back in the wintertime, okay? We know a lot about people based on their art and archaeology. Like, where did they place their buildings, their most important buildings? That tells us about what they valued. What do we see in these people's art? That tells us about what they valued, right? Just like how we talked about how with geography, like how the Greeks were very much influenced by that. For example, they named some of their most powerful gods after the sea, Poseidon, god of the sea, right? So that obviously the sea is very important to ancient Greeks, which is true because, as you know, most of Greece was covered in mountains, and the Greeks had to rely on the sea for trade. So how ancient civilizations set up their religions and their myths, that tells us so much about what the living people value, as does their art and architecture. All right, so make sure you get all the stuff on this slide down. And think of these themes and this objective as things that are going to guide our entire study of the ancient Minoans and the Mycenaeans. Okay? These are pretty vague, but we're going to start filling in the blank. And hopefully by the end of this, we're going to be studying something and you're going to be like, oh, that's just like this theme down here that Mr. Johnson said about how we know what we know about these people because of archaeology, right? So I want you to keep these themes and this objective in mind the entire time we are studying. So make sure you wrote them in your notes, you circle them, you start committing them to memory. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I want to talk a little bit more about archaeology. Now, I should also point out that we are going to start talking about the Minoans first. So everything that I'm saying on this slide especially has to do with the Minoan civilization. Now, remember, archaeology is the study of digging up human artifacts from ancient civilizations and learning about those civilizations through what you discover. All right? So we're digging up things in the ground, we're trying to dig up pottery and artwork and tools, even buildings, and we're trying to learn about that ancient civilization through what we dig up. It's a great job, it's a current job. Any one of you, if you find this interesting, can grow up and become an archaeologist. And it's stimulating for the mind. I'm sure it's a great way to stay in shape too. You're just outside digging things up all day and learning about them. So that's what archaeology is doing, right? Now here's the point. We know about the Minoans through artifacts, especially through art. The reason this is because no one has been able to translate their language ever. Therefore, we need archaeology, ladies and gentlemen. Because we cannot read the language of the Minoans, we need archaeology to know anything at all about them. So the only reason we know anything about the Minoans is archaeology, through digging up their artifacts, their art, their tools, their buildings, and using that as like puzzle pieces to this giant mystery of just who the heck are these people and what do they value. You might remember back when we were doing the 8 traits of civilization, I gave an example of, say there's a civilization who we can't read their language and the only way to know about them is through archaeology. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we made it. This is that specific example. We cannot read the Minoan language, therefore we need archaeology. Sure, we've learned about the Minoans because other civilizations whose languages we could read told us about them, but we must keep in mind, one civilization writing about another civilization, that's going to be a little bias, right? Like say the Minoans traded with Egypt and the Egyptians did not like the Minoans. They could say, we don't like those Minoans. They are really uncultured and they throw their feces at everyone they meet, right? It's obviously not true, but we must be careful when studying what other people say about a civilization because, hey, not everyone gets along, and some people are going to talk some smack. It's much more vital to get information about the civilization from the civilization. And in this case, that's from archaeology because, again, we can't read their language. Now, just again, reminding you of the theme, civilizations create art that reflects their culture and values. What do you see? What you see in the art and culture shows what they valued. But it's not just that, it's also what you don't see in the art. That tells us about their culture and what they valued as well. So think about it this way. If you look at, say, 10 paintings from the Minoans, you're going to see some patterns, some similarities, but what if you don't see examples of anything that civilizations normally do? Well, clearly that tells you, hey, the Minoans left this out of all of their art. They must not value that. They must not have done that. So, for example, say the Minoans left any examples of trade out of their art. Spoiler alert, they didn't. They really liked trade. So you don't see any examples of trade. That would tell you that, hey, these people must have been very self-sufficient and maybe they didn't value trade because they didn't need to. So keep that in mind. It's not just what you see in the art that shows what they valued, it's also what you don't see. That one is a little harder because you have to make lots of inferences or educated guesses and say, well, I didn't see any examples of blank this in their art, right? So therefore they might not value it. Okay. Why am I telling you about this? Because what I'm going to say next is what you're going to do that's a part of your homework assignment. We're essentially going to do what's known as a gallery walk. So imagine we're at a Minoan art museum and you're just walking through the art gallery and you're looking at the art. Or if you don't want to imagine it like that, imagine you yourself are an archaeologist. Congratulations, all right, it's a fun job. And you just dug up a whole bunch of Minoan art and artifacts. Now you're going to put your archaeologist hat on and try to say, what does this civilization value? Folks, I'm not just going to sit here and tell you, here's the Minoans, here's what they valued, moving on. That's pretty boring. First, I'm going to show you some pieces of art and artifacts, and I want you, ladies and gentlemen, to put on your archaeology hats and to try to tell me what this civilization valued based on the art, architecture, and artifacts. I'm very excited to see what you come up with. I'm very excited. Okay, so here's the assignment. Gallery walk. For each art piece, pause the video and write down what you see in the art and what you think the Minoans valued or didn't value based on the art. Now, for the or didn't value part, that might need to come at the end after you see everything. Obviously, they can't include their entire culture in one painting. But think about it. I'm going to show you four things. After you see these four things, what did you not see? Well, that tells you that that thing clearly was not important to them. Now, I just want to highlight a couple things. Do make sure you pause the video for each one. We're not in class, so I'm not going to pause the video for a few minutes like I just did. It's up to you. So for each one, pause it. Try to pause it for a couple of minutes. Write down what you see and what you think they valued. Remember, folks, this theme right here. Civilizations create art that reflects their culture and their values. What you see in the art and architecture shows what they valued. So for each one, and label them 1 through 4, write down what you see, what you think they valued, and we're just guessing here. And at the end, write what you think they didn't value based on what you did not see. So I hope that makes sense. There's also instructions in the email. So I'm going to put up the first piece of art now, and you're going to write, and you make sure to remember to pause the video, because I'm going to go through these four pretty quick. Pause the video, spend a few minutes on each one. Okay, remember, you're archaeologists. You just discovered these artifacts. Tell us what they mean. Here's the first one. So make sure to pause the video if you already didn't, because I'm going to move on to the next one in 3, 2, 1. Here's number 2. Again, make sure to pause the video for a few minutes and write down what you see and what you think they valued, because I'm going to move on in 3, 2, 1. The third one. Reminder to pause the video if you already didn't, because I'm going to move on in 3, 2, 1. And the fourth one. Make sure you pause the video because I'm going to end this video very, very soon. Alright, folks, so remember, if you need to go back and look at those, that's totally fine. Remember that you are pausing the video on each one, and I want a couple of sentences for each of these. Make it detailed, okay, ladies and gentlemen? Well, that's all we have for today, and in case I don't see ya, good morning, good afternoon, and good night.